If you remember from last week, the topic is Moche Emche versus Moche Timche. It's a very interesting idea, right? That in Pashas B'Shalach it says Emche, I will erase Amalek, right? In Pashas B'Shalach it says Moche Emche. That's here on your page. Moche Emche, I will erase. And down here it says Timche, you should erase. In B'Shalach it says I will erase, and in Kiseitzi, which is in Devarim, the last of the 5 Chomashim, it says Timche. And of course, the Rebbe analyzes the difference between Hashem erasing and we erase. And the point that the Rebbe makes is, for Hashem to erase the memory of Amalek, we can understand. Because Hashem can get into our brains. Hashem can make us forget. But when it says, Moche Timche, or Timche Zecher Amalek, you should erase Amalek. Fine, I can erase Amalek, but how can I erase the memory of Amalek? It doesn't make any sense. So there's a Rashi in Pashas Kiseitz. Now understand, we're learning Sichas Adraban Chumash, and we're holding in Pashas B'Shalach. And I decided to join together the story of erasing Amalek in our Pasha with the Sichas of the Rebbe in Pashas Kiseitz, which the Eibishter repeats again, the mitzvah of erasing Amalek. So the Rebbe says like this: when Hashem erases Amalek, he actually gets into our head and erases the memory of Amalek. When we erase Amalek, we can't do that. So therefore, Rashi says our erasing Amalek is not getting into our heads and pulling Amalek out of our heads. It's erasing from the world all of the landmarks, all of the things that represent Amalek, which means you have to get rid of the people and the animals. And that's where we're holding. We started the Sikha, we did page 86, and we did page 87, okay? So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to reread the last paragraph of page 87, and we're going to proceed. I want to move on, okay? And I want to see, this is a Rashi Sikha, which means it's a technical Sikha. It's a Sikha that analyzes the Rashi, which is wonderful. But my interest in teaching these classes is more to get to the Chassidus of the Sikhas, which is the very, very end of this Sikha. So let's continue to read, okay? All you need to understand is that the Rashi says, and I'm putting the Rebbe's words into Rashi's words. When it says Hashem says, I will erase Amalek, we understand the meaning of the word Zecher. Hashem can erase the memory of Amalek. Hashem can get into our head and pull the memory out. But when it says you should erase the memory of Amalek, how do we erase the memory of Amalek? So Rashi says we erase those things that remind us of Amalek, which is people and animals. And again, just for the record, I want to repeat again that according to Halacha, Amalek is gone. There is no Amalek because Amalek was assimilated. So the idea of killing Amalek is a mitzvah, which we have to do, but we will never be able to do it. Just like the several other mitzvahs that go into that category, they're included in the 613 mitzvahs, according to the Rambam, because there's no limitation to the time of the mitzvah. There's simply a limitation to the time of the entity, the thing with which the mitzvah needs to be performed. I just opened the can of worms. I want to close it and seal it shut and put it back in the closet. Okay? So this is a theoretical idea. It's not a practical idea. You have to erase everything that reminds you of Amalek, says Rashi, people and animals. Let's read. Page 87. You have your copy? Last paragraph. Now I'm going to be really, really nice to myself and actually pull up. Let me show you how much I'm an AK. I'm not even 60 and I'm using these. At home, I have these with lights. It makes a difference. When I read, I fall asleep. With this, I sleep. I fall asleep a little slower. I'm a young man, but my eyes. This is what Rashi is explaining. Hatzivui in Pashas Kiseitzi, in the end of the Chumash, where Hashem is not saying, I will erase Amalek. Hashem, God. But you, people should erase Amalek. Huloi al mechias zikorin Amalek mimachsheves ha'adam. It's not talking about erasing the memory of Amalek from our thought. That's impossible. Ki im rather, Limchais es kol advarim, to remove those physical things, hamaskidim shmoi shel Amalek, which would remind us the name of Amalek. And we need to get rid of those physical things. Okay, turn the page. Now we're doing page 88. And again, all I do is the underline, correct? Yes, ma'am.
So if we don't know who Amalek is right now, how do we get up?
We can't. That's what I said. This is no longer a practical mitzvah. After Sancheiriv, he confused all nations. It's a mitzvah that we will never be able to physically do. It's a theoretical. It's one of the Tayag mitzvahs. I sort of remember I told you I opened the can of worms. I want to close it and put it in the shelf. Forget it. It was this question that I opened and closed. The Rambam holds there's a rule about mitzvahs that for something to be counted as a mitzvah, it has to be for all times. If it's for a short time, it's not a mitzvah. Nevertheless, the Rambam holds erasing Amalek is a mitzvah. So the Rambam asks a question on himself. If I hold it for something to be a mitzvah, to be in eternity, how could I hold that erasing Amalek is a mitzvah when we can't do it anymore? So the Rebbe says, the limitation isn't in the Torah, the limitation is in the world. The Rambam says, if the Torah would say, do this mitzvah until this date, it wouldn't be a mitzvah. But there's no date on erasing Amalek. You find Amalek, you have to kill him. We can't do it because Amalek no longer exists, but that's not a limitation in the Torah, that's a limitation of the world. You understand? You follow, there's certain mitzvahs that are not connected to time. Right? There's a mitzvah to send away a mother bird if you want to take the chicks. If you're not interested in the chicks or the eggs, you don't have to send away the mother bird. So you'll never do the mitzvah, but it's a mitzvah. Why? Because the limitation isn't in the Torah, the limitation is in your interest. You don't want to do it. You understand? So you're right. Practically, the way I understand it, there's no mitzvah raising Amalek because Amalek is similar. They're God. As a nation, as an identity, as an entity, they're God. But the inyan of erasing Amalek is, and the Rebbe says when Hashem erases Amalek, he gets into our head and he calls it out. When we erase Amalek, we erase the things in the world that represent Amalek physically. Go ahead.
So if it's not that practical like nowadays, so why the Torah mentions it? Like the Torah mentions just the things that are like related. Like,
well, the simple answer is because when the Torah was written, it was practical, right? The more complicated answer is Torah melashon hara. Even if a mitzvah cannot be done physically, the idea of the mitzvah is in eternity. And the idea of the mitzvah is that there in this world Hashem created good and evil. Most of what is evil has good in it. And when you find something which is evil, you separate the good from the bad and you lift up the good. Sometimes there is evil that you have to just destroy. And that's an eternal message. You have to always know that. You understand?
yeah.
And that's what Amalek represents. And in life, it's the klippa that doesn't disagree with you. It's the klippa that laughs at you. It's the klippa that says, you're nothing and I don't know why. I hate God and I'm not giving you a reason. As we discussed at length, we've been talking about this for weeks now. Go ahead. I'll get back to you and say, go ahead.
So the Rambam considers it as a mitzvah?
There's the one of the 630 commandments. Yes, he does. And he explains, he actually dialogues, he discusses the question that I just shared with you in the Sharashim, in the introduction to the Sefer HaMitzvahs. Go ahead.
Hashem is one, so how can Amalek be so totally, and that's like...
So I want to tell you, the Sikha that I prepared, the next one, is going to talk about that question. It's interesting. It's especially interesting because yesterday and this morning, I was involved with a discussion with a Yid who lives in Muncie, who was learning Chitas. And then Chitas today, you're talking about Hashem being one. He said, wait a minute, if Hashem is one, how do we make a Dira B'tachtainim? So I'm getting it from all sides. I'm getting the stereo version of, if Hashem is one, so then how do we serve him? If Hashem is one, how does Amalek exist? So here's the next Sikha we're going to learn, which is the last Sikha we're going to be doing on Amalek. And then we're going to go back to Siddur Mitzvah Hashem, Bli Neder. Is going to be addressing your question, at least in part. Okay? Let's go. Page 88. The Inyan Zecher Amalek. And the idea of erasing the memory of Amalek, the Hainu Toichen Atzivui Al Mechias Amalek. In other words, the meaning of the commandment to erase Amalek, move on Mashe Kosev explains why Rashi brings Gam Tchilas HaKosov Me'ishvat Gebed. You have to erase people and you have to erase animals. In other words, the Rebbe's question was, of course you have to get rid of people. That's the mitzvah, right? Zecher Amalek, the memory of Amalek means animals. But why do you have to mention also in the word Zecher Amalek also people? So the Rebbe says because Rashi is trying to explain to us that when Hashem gives us a mitzvah to erase Amalek, it means all things, people and animals that carry that name. Now go to the next page 89. Rashi says, Loimed, this means you have to get rid of human beings and animals that carry the name Amalek. This means Loimed, because people would say, Behemezu mishal Amalek hoisa, this animal used to belong to Amalek. Okay? And Rashi is resolving a question with this. Since Hashem gives a yid a mitzvah, gives me a mitzvah, you a mitzvah, it's not enough to erase Amalek. We have to erase the memory of Amalek. Now, what does it mean for me and you to erase the memory of Amalek? Bidvarim ha'ma'oidim hazikarim. Anything which is going to make you remember, this used to be Amalek. Al yedei sheyoimnu aleihim. The people are going to say about them, Zu mishal Amalek hoisa. This used to belong to Amalek. So erasing Amalek is getting rid of the people. Erasing the memory of Amalek is erasing anything which is going to remind you of Amalek. I want to tell you something. I was thinking it last week. I didn't say it. I'm going to say it now, even though it's really not only not directly connected to our subject, it's even in a way a contradiction to our subject, but I want to share it with you anyway. I had an uncle who has recently passed away. They just now had Shloshim. His name is Rabbi Paltiel. My father's older brother. He was a real genius. I am said God. He was a real genius. And he was a professor. He was a very religious man. He was a professor of ancient history. That was his thing, or ancient Jewish history. So he told me an interesting thing. I mean, he lived in Australia and I lived here, so I didn't see him often. But when we would meet, I would love to talk to him. He always had interesting things to say. So he told me that when Yidden came into Eretz Yisrael, one of the mitzvahs they were given was to destroy Avodah Zarah. In other words, not only Yidden were not allowed to worship idols, they had to destroy idols, they had to destroy the idols. Now, in his field of work, one of the most important parts of his work is archaeology, where they'll go and they'll dig up, old civil, Israel is piles, if you just dig straight down, you're going back through history, one civilization, a second civilization, a third civilization, and you could literally, as you go down through the rock, through the sand, you find the, mamish, one on top of the other, on top of the other. It's remarkable. Israel is one of the oldest lands in the world, so it's particularly prone to this phenomenon. He says you can find Avodah Zarahs before Yidden came. You can find Avodah Zarahs that the Yidden themselves made when they began to sin, but you'll never find an Avodah Zarah from the time of Yeshua. As a historian, tell me, they didn't leave one Avodah Zarah. They broke it, they smashed and they destroyed. In other words, archaeology means things that you find that were left over from one civilization to the next by mistake. He says from the time when the Yidden first came into Israel, you can't find one. He said they did a good job. They destroyed every Avodah Zarah. Now, over there we're talking about rocks, precious stones, statues. Here we're talking about a civilization, right? Not idols, a way of life. The people that are called Amalek. Rashi says the erasing of the Zecher Amalek, which means to erase things that remind you of Amalek means you have to destroy the people and the animals, not the real estate. And the question is why. So
if it's the real estate that you can't destroy,
you don't have to. You don't have to. It's no mitzvah.
Oh, so animals and humans only.
Right. And the question is why. So the Rebbe is going to give us a Rashi answer, a Pshat answer. At the very end of the Sikh, he's going to give us a Hasidus answer. And God forgive me, I'm more interested in the Hasidus we're going to have at the end than the Rashi we're going to have now. So let's read. Okay. The idea that something exists that's reminding you of somebody who existed yesterday. They're gone. They don't exist anymore. Right? Amalek is gone. But then there are things that are called Zecher Amalek. They remind you of Amalek. What reminds you of Amalek? the people, obviously, and the livestock, the animals. An animal which belonged yesterday to Amalek. If I have it today, oh, this guy used to belong to Amalek. But you only say it about people and animals. You don't say it about other possessions. And the question is why? So the Rebbe continues. Page 89, second column. You're with me? The other place? The explanation is as follows. When you talk about domestic animals, which includes also wild animals. Page 89, second column. There's no way to change an animal absolutely. You should not be able to see at all. Her earlier form. Or to affect in an animal a change, which cannot be reversed. It's so simple. Yeah. If you change an animal, what does he become? There's only one way to change an animal: kill him. You know, if you kill an animal, the animal's gone, finished. Yeah. You eat him up, you feed him to the dogs, you bury him, gone. But if the animal's alive, how can you change a living animal? Now, what about a house? A house isn't alive. You're going to kill a house if you change the front. You understand? The Rebbe says a human being, if he's the same human being he was yesterday, he has the same name, Amalek. Can't change that. An animal, if the animal is still alive, it still belonged to Amalek last week. There's no way. There is a way. Kill him, but if you kill him, he's not an animal anymore. But so long as he's organic, as he's living, there's no way to change this animal and to dissociate it from its earlier identity. But this is unique only to people and animals. That's why Rashi says the mitzvah we have to erase Amalek, as opposed to the mitzvah Hashem has to erase Amalek. Hashem's mitzvah to erase Amalek is to get the memories out of our head, whatever that means. But for us to erase the memory of Amalek only means people and animals, because only when it comes to people and animals, there's no way to change it. You just can't change them. If they're still alive, they're the same. Let's keep reading.
But how can you not change people?
They have the capacity to change emotionally. But when you talk about identity, who are you? Amalek is Amalek is Amalek. Or you used to be Amalek. You understand? So the Rebbe says like this, Ubefrat particularly, she'osu latzar es balechaim, you're not allowed to hurt animals unduly, right? In Tzar balechaim, it says you're not allowed to give pain to an animal. So how are you going to change the animal? You can't even hurt him. In other words, keep the animal alive and change him in such a way that no one is going to say, oh, I remember 2 years ago I saw this animal, he was being led by someone from Amalek. You can't do that. The imkain accordingly, ef shalasas bashinui hamitzad, you can't make a change in the animal and keep the animal alive, which causes it pain. Umizem move which leads to the following conclusion: Shegam kashetei habehema l'reshus bailim chadosh. The animal belonged to Amalek, and Amalek sold it. The animal belonged to Amalek, and you stole it from Amalek. The animal belonged from Amalek, and it wandered off into the wilderness, and it disappeared, and it showed up in a different community, and they adopted it. Says the Rebbe, me'acha she'ein shayach b'shine gomer, you're physically not able to really change it. Nisher aleha reishem shel ba'ila b'rishenim. It still has a reishem, a trace, an association by identity with its earlier master. Ubetava ha'adam, it is human nature. Lihizocher al yoda, to look at this animal and remember. Shmom shel ba'aleh ha'koidmim, the name of her earlier owners. It's just, you can't get around it. V'lachein, and therefore, behemas Amalek, or behemas Amalek, an animal from Amalek. Gam kishetava l'reshus Yisrael, even if it changes ownership, it becomes Jewish. There's no way you can keep an animal alive and change its appearance and change its definition absolutely. No, as long as the animal is alive, people are going to say, it used to belong to Amalek. And therefore, you haven't missed Amalek's name. So the Pasuk says, and Rashi brings, when it comes to people and animals, because there's no way to change them without short of killing them, in a way that they no longer reflect what they were before, you have to wipe them out. Let's continue. Please look inside. Bottom of page 89. Girls, you know how I do this. I read only the underlined, right? If you have a building that belongs to Amalek, you don't have to bulldoze it to the ground. It's sufficient. And certainly necessary. Alpi pshute shall make a pay shin mem is Rashi Tevis. Pshute shall make a simple reading of the pasuk. She knew that you should change it enough, but often to such an extent, you look at its new form, it doesn't remind you of Amalek. Because a building, you don't have to kill. You just change. You change the number of floors. You change how it looks. You change the landscaping. You make new windows. There's a lot of things you can do to an existing structure that it becomes so changed materially a form that you forget that it was that other thing before. So Rashi is telling us, Rashi is helping us understand the pasuk, right? And again, I'm being very repetitious. There is two mitzvahs to the mitzvah of erasing Amalek. Number one, you have to erase Amalek. And number two, you have to erase the memory of Amalek. Erasing Amalek, we understand. It's not a comfortable thought, but we understand what it means. Erasing the memory of Amalek is a weird thing. So the Rebbe says, Hashem's erasing the memory of Amalek. I understand. The Abish can get into our head and make us forget. But how do I erase the memory of Amalek? Kill all animals and people. What about buildings, cars? The teretz is those things you don't have to kill. You can change them in such a way that they no longer are identified as having before belonged to Amalek. You can't do that with people and animals. Turn the page. This was page 89, not page 90. V'zehu continues the Rebbe and he says, V'zehu shemoisif Rashi. And this is what Rashi adds. Loima, that people would say, V'hei mezu mishal Amalek hoisa. This animal once belonged to Amalek. Shayedezem movement, because Rashi is trying to help us understand. Lama le'nitztavu, why there is no mitzvah, limches kol nechsi Amalek. To destroy all the property, a car that belonged to Amalek, a truck that belonged to Amalek, a building that belonged to Amalek, even a landmark that belonged to Amalek. You don't have to destroy them. Besides for living things. Why? Because a living thing is not sufficiently changeable and to keep it alive that it should lose its earlier identity. But a non-organic thing, a non-living thing could. Only by destroying it, that means by killing it, you erase them. Now here's the question, what about trees? Which category? Trees are alive or not alive? They are, but they aren't. Trees are an interesting in-between stage, right? I understand that I don't have to destroy a building to forget Amalek. I have to just change it enough that the Zeichet is gone. People and animals, you can't do that. What about a tree? What about, Rashi doesn't say you have to destroy all trees that carry the name of Amalek. It's an interesting question, and I'm not sure what the answer is. My inclination is that trees don't identify with people.
What do you say? Like can they be property? Like
they are property, but they're not property in the kind of way that you say, this tree belonged to Moshe, this animal belonged to Moshe, this car belonged to Moshe. This tree, it's a tree, unless it's a vedazor, unless it's a sheda. In which case, there's another chayiv to destroy them. But stam a tree, a person has trees, have a brush face. It's a question. Why doesn't Rashi include them this requirement to get rid of the trees and vegetation? Because they're also alive and also limited into what extent you're able to change them and so on and so forth. But okay, I don't know. So we have something left to ponder. Okay, now girls, this is the end of the Sikha. This is the end of the Rashi part of the Sikha, okay? The Sikha is not over. We have two more things to learn. But what we just read, last week I gave you a class. And if you remember what we did last week, we spent a lot of time reviewing the Chumash. We pushed it, went over the entire Chumash. Remember, we learned the Chumash inside. And at the end of the class, we started the Sikha, where the Rebbe asks the questions, why people and animals are not other things, and we just answered the question, okay? So if you have comments or questions, make them now. Otherwise, I'm going to move on to another topic. It's related, but it's separate. Okay, so I'm warning you. Either you speak now, or as they say in the culture, forever hold your peace. We're good?
Some questions.
Go ahead.
So if Hashem is commanding us to erase Amalek and erase everything that reminds us of Amalek, why is part of the 6 remembrance?
In other words, by remembering Amalek, we're not forgetting him.
Right.
Okay, guess what? That's what we're about to learn right here. That's the next thing. Okay?
Wait, how do we relate to it right now? Like,
You walked out of the room, lady. She asked the question. I'll answer you. I'll be nice to myself. I'm very selfish man.
I appreciate it.
I'll be nice to myself and answer you. The Nakuda is that Hashem created the world good and evil. The rule of thumb is, it's common sense. There's no good without evil, there's no evil without good. Everything is a mix. So everything has a redemptive quality. Everything has something good about it. Every civilization, every living thing. And in terms of serving Hashem, we want to separate the good from the bad and take the good and use it. Hashem and dispose of the bad. Amalek represents something that's bad, period. You have to destroy it. Don't fix it. Don't fancy it up. Don't come, you understand? That's an eternal message. Physically, Amalek is gone, but the idea of Amalek, that some things are so evil, they just need to be destroyed, that's Amalek. You understand? And that's an eternal lesson. Okay? Okay, anybody else?
Wait, what about like when we talk about the details, like we talk about like the animals and the trees, like how do we relate to that?
You're pushing me, man. You're pushing me. No, you're not sorry. You shouldn't be sorry. So now we can invent philosophies. We can invent philosophies. Now, I don't know what to do with the trees. But the last part, she asked me about what we're going to be learning next. You're asking me what we're going to be learning after that. There's two more pieces of Sikha. The first is her question. The second is yours. But the Rebbe is going to flip it around. He's not going to say, how do we erase animals nowadays? He's going to say, how come we don't have to destroy buildings? And he's going to give a gewaldige pshat, a chassidus, which is beautiful. Okay, so in other words, it's not going to answer how do I destroy the animals of Amalek nowadays. It'll explain why I don't need to destroy the buildings of Amalek. Okay, we can talk about people, we can talk about animals, philosophia. We'll see. Okay? Go ahead, don't be afraid.
What about like people that are like Jews, for example, Jews that are like against Jews, or like people that have like some kind of like klipa that are like just wanting to do bad to other people. Like how are we supposed to like not destroy, but like deal with that, like in a way of like destroying it?
There are halachas, there's Jewish law about how to deal with bad and with bad people. It's a very rare person that Torah defines as absolutely evil. If you learn Tanya Perek Lamed Beis, chapter 32, the Alter Rebbe talks about Lamed Avos Yisrael. At the very end of the Perek, he mentions that there are some people that you have to destroy. You hate absolutely. But that's a high madrega of evil. You have to be really, really a bad person to be in that class. Short of that, pardon me, everybody has good. Everybody has good. You know what I'm saying? And a Torah, you have to cultivate the good which is in each person. Fair enough? I'm not answering you. Shall we? We move on, girls. Page 91. So we finished the Sikha, right? And what do we do in the Sikha? We learned that there's two things, and the two becomes three things. The two things are Amalek and Zecher Amalek, Amalek and the memory of Amalek. And Zecher Amalek has two parts, the way Hashem erases Zecher Amalek and how we erase Zecher Amalek. And we determined Zecher Amalek really means animals. Everything else, you don't have to erase, okay? So now comes her very simple and logical and obvious question. The worst way to erase Amalek is to remember every day that you're supposed to erase Amalek. Huh? V'hine le'acher kol zeh tamud, there's a question. Eich efshe limches zarei shel Amalek. How are we supposed to erase, not zarei, zichrei shel Amalek? Not only we're supposed to erase the people of Amalek, we're supposed to erase the memory of Amalek. V'harei ma'ashe'ira la'Amalek, what happened between us and Amalek, ukama parshiyos b'Torah. There's several places in the Torah that describe Amalek and their character and who they were and what they did to us. How are you supposed to erase a nation that's written in the Chumash? Adarabah, to be sure, nitztavinu, we were commanded. Rakishama lecha v'goymen, pen tishbach v'goymen, upen yasudu milvavacha. First of all, there's a special Aveda. You're not allowed to forget Torah. It included not forgetting Torah, not forgetting the story of Amalek. Moreover, this is what you asked me directly. The commandment in our Pasha, Pasha's Kiseitze is, remember what Amalek did to you. Remembering what Amalek did to you is the antithesis of Timcha Zecher Amalek. You're not only erasing Amalek, you're erasing the memory of Amalek. How are you supposed to erase the memory of Amalek if you're reminding yourself every day Amalek has to be erased? In psychology, what would be the psychological parallel for this? This is such a real issue, right? Somebody hurts you. So I suppose the human nature is you want to take revenge. Revenge is a midah. Torah says don't take revenge, but putting aside the midah, somebody hurt you, yeah, and you're angry at them. Every minute that you're angry at them, they're hurting you again. What is the best way you can stop that person or that thing from hurting you? Is to take them out of your memory, huh? But you're angry at them. You don't want to forget. There's a circle here, You hurt me, and I'm never going to forget that you hurt me. In not forgetting that you hurt me, you continue to hurt me. So you know what? For me, you don't exist. To say that and to mean that is not a simple feat, right? By Amalek, there's a special mitzvah to remember them. How are you supposed to remember them and forget their memory? So the Rebbe answers, and what the Rebbe says is common sense. You see what I'm reading? Va'ayin chof tzadik lamed, parenthesis, gam pei, beis, pei, shin, shin, mem, in the parenthesis. Page 91, second paragraph. The answer has to be. Gam bepshute shamik, even on the pshat level. The asura zechiras Amalek l'shem zechira. To remember Amalek for the sake of Amalek is not allowed. Which would mean practically you're not allowed to study the history of Amalek. If you go to university and they have a course on Amalek, you're not allowed to study that. Why? Because that's zecher Amalek. Wait. However, mechuyev zechiras Amalek l'shem mechiyah zechri. You're obligated to remember Amalek to erase his memory. To talk about Amalek, Stamazoi, the archaeologists found up in the southwest of Eretz Yisrael some bones that represent the ancient nation of Amalek. A Yid is not allowed to study that. Why? He's not allowed to remember Amalek. There is Amalek. But the mitzvah to remember Amalek in order to erase him, this yet. So the Rebbe splits a hair. He says, and he's saying about Kochach Tzadok. There's no other way to explain it. You're not allowed to allow Amalek to exist. You have to erase not just Amalek, but the memory of Amalek. The memory of Amalek as an entity unto itself is not allowed to be brought up. The memory of Amalek as a means of saying, we're destroying Amalek, this is a mitzvah. Moreover, the Rebbe says, initially, from the first place, I'm on top of the second column, 91. Minig hu, there's a custom by Jews. Rebbe brings an interesting custom. Lichtev shmei, to write Amalek's name al eitzim va'avanim, on pieces of wood or pieces of stone. B'shvil l'mchayse, to then erase it. Al yedei hakosha, by hitting it. Sha'arei ef shaloi, because it's impossible for me. L'kayim mitzvahs timcha ezecher Amalek, for me to erase the memory of Amalek. Meblish yichtevu tchila, if I don't write it first. In other words, if I lived in the times of Moshe Rabbeinu, I could fulfill the mitzvah erasing Amalek by finding a chicken that belonged to Amalek and killing it. But today, how am I going to erase Amalek? Only one way. The Rebbe doesn't say it, but people used to write Amalek on the bottom of the shoe and then rub it out. To write it in order to erase it. That's a mitzvah. Because the mitzvah of erasing Amalek is not just erasing the people of Amalek, it's erasing the zecher of Amalek, and that's a mitzvah. So the Rebbe says the answer to your question directly is, there is no way to resolve this question of how am I supposed to erase the memory of Amalek if I have a mitzvah to remember the memory of Amalek in order to erase it. The teretz is to remember Amalek as such is not allowed. To remember Amalek, to erase him, is a mitzvah. I'm going to give you a similarity, a simile, okay? It's not exact, but it's just an interesting parallel. There is a special Aveda It's an osir. It's isir. You're not allowed to learn the customs of Avodah Zarah. You're not allowed. It's also, this is one of the big problems when you have from Jews who become professors of comparative religion, they have to learn religions of Avodah Zarah. It's also abidin. It's not allowed halachically for a person to study about a name of Avodah Zarah. Okay? What if you're a member of Sanhedrin? Of the rabbinical court, Sanhedrin.
Yeah.
Sanhedrin had a mitzvah to study Avodah Zarah.
Why?
Because they had to know what Avodah Zarah is in order to know what's not allowed. So it's the same thing. If I'm studying Avodah Zarah because I'm a professor, I'm studying Avodah Zarah out of curiosity, I'm studying Avodah Zarah as part of my research into history, it's not allowed, not allowed. If I'm studying Avodah Zarah as a Rav, who needs to paskin what is an Avodah Zarah, what's not Avodah Zarah, then the same thing becomes a mitzvah. And the same is true here. To talk about the memory of Amalek is not allowed, not allowed. It's an interesting idea if you think about it, right? People have curiosities. Now, I don't know you that well, right? Some people like science. Some people like philosophy. Some people like history. And some people like culture, ancient cultures, medieval cultures, whatever the case is. So if you have a curiosity in different cultures, you want to learn about, the Incas and the Aztecs and all the different tribes that lived in the Americas and lived in the ancient worlds, right? You can study those civilizations. You can't study their idols, not allowed. Verstehst? You understand? This is two halachas. If you were a member of Sanhedrin, you would have a requirement to know what's Avodah Zarah in case these ideas would come before you in halachic circumstance. The same is true here. You're not allowed to study Amaleki civilization. Asr. That's the mitzvah of erasing the memory of Amalek. A Yid is not allowed to engage in the research to find out who Amalek is, where Amalek is, erase their memory. Unless the only reason you're engaging in the study of the memory of Amalek is to erase them, then it becomes a mitzvah. You understand what I'm saying? Go ahead.
But then we're like learning it from the Torah. So how does?
Because when we're learning it in the Torah, we're learning it to be Mekayim this mitzvah of Mechiyah Zecher Amalek. Otherwise, it's not allowed. It's the worst kind of punishment. It's the worst kind of punishment. I always tell the same story. My oldest son, Zoltan Gesund, must have been 8 or 9. He's very smart. He's also very sensitive. And like any Jewish kid who grows up, at one point in your childhood, you learn about Hitler. You learn about the Holocaust. I mean, I'm older than you. I'm not older than you, but I'm older than most of you. I knew many survivors personally. I knew many survivors. I remember a man coming to our home and selling my father a book on the war about himself, his own life. He wrote a book in Yiddish about his experiences in the camps. It was in the early 70s. He was a man at that point, probably in his 50s, but he was a bocharol. He was So my son, like any other Yiddish kind, at a certain point learned about Hitler, and he learned what it means Yamach Shemoy, and he learned. It's hard to believe, when you learn that 1 out of every 3 Jews was killed on purpose, not 5,000 years ago, but from a historical perspective, the day before yesterday, 70 years ago. It's very disturbing. It's very, very upsetting. So when he went through this process of learning about Hitler, he says, I forgot how he worded it, but he's going to make sure that they're going to burn Hitler 6 million times. But they're going to burn him, and they're going to burn him, and they're going to burn him, and they're going to burn him. So I said to my son, they're not going to burn Hitler. I said, why not? I said, because Hitler doesn't exist. Finished. He's gone. Not he's gone physically, a klip, an evil like Hitler is gone. There is no spiritual place where the Indian of Hitler exists. He says, wait, that's not fair. That's not fair. He killed so many people. He caused so much pain. He gets away scot-free. He just disappears. So I said to my son, the worst punishment anybody can have is not existing. It's worse than pain. And he couldn't accept that. Even I don't accept it, but it's true. The worst thing a human being can experience is to not be. Amalek has it even worse. He isn't except to remember that he isn't. You're not allowed to study Amalek. Are you allowed to study the Second World War? Are you allowed to study the character, the philosophy of the Nazis? You could say halachically, if you want to be cute and creative and think at the back to say maybe studying the Nazis. There's a very big culture of Nazi paraphernalia. People are. I don't know what the right word is. The Nazi culture intrigues people. There's a lot of curiosity around it. It's a fact. It's a fact. People, not that they like them, not that they want to be accused of being one of them, but the people are curious about that whole, how could such a civilization have existed? And again, it didn't exist in the jungles of Asia 4,000 years ago. It existed in the middle of Europe, historically speaking, the day before yesterday, 70 years ago, 80 years. How could such a thing exist? People are very intrigued by it. You could make the case you're not allowed to study it. Don't just leave it alone. Let it go. Don't put it in history books. Let it sort of vanish. Now you have to put it in history books because of the old adage: if you don't remember history, you have to repeat it. But the idea of Kochenzach in Nazism, you could make a case that you're not allowed to study it. And I'm not saying that that's the halacha. I'm just sharing with you an insight as a means of a provocation. So, but anyway, the Amalek, what's the case of Amalek? You're not allowed to study Amalek. Not allowed. You're not allowed to research the culture, the civilization of Amalek. It's Isser. Why? The mechiyuv is to erase the memory of Amalek, unless you're remembering Amalek for the distinct purpose of erasing him. You follow? You're listening? Yeah? Okay, so this is the answer to your question, correct? Now, let's get to your question. You ready? I'm moving on. Please look inside the bottom of.
Question, Rabbi.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead, please.
You said Hitler doesn't exist anymore, but this ideology just, so how does that? I mean, in terms of what we just explained, how does that?
Please explain your question. Okay, guys, you can't do this. I can't deal with this.
You said
Explain to me.
is like God.
What do you mean the Hitler's ideology exists? What does that mean?
Or philosophy, you have all these, there's still some groups who call themselves, and like anti-Semite groups, they're still under,
That identify with the Nazis.
Yeah.
So we could make an argument that the mitzvah of erasing the memory of Amalek is to destroy that. There's two things. There's an anti-Semite. There's an anti-Semite who calls himself a follower of Hitler. There's something about erasing the memory of Amalek, not just Amalek, but the memory of Amalek. I'm suggesting this. I'm not speaking now in terms or in grounds of halacha. I'm just talking as an illustration, a hypothetical illustration of the topic that we're in the midst of discussing. That maybe you're right. Maybe it's one thing to be an anti-Semite. It's another to be an anti-Semite who identifies with Hitler. Perhaps. What I said to my son was more about the personality. We're not talking about the idea. It was a human being. He was evil. Hitler was evil, right? The old question, if you were introduced to Hitler as a 2-year-old and told this man is going to destroy the world, is going to bring about 90 million deaths, 6 million Jews, would you kill him? You understand that question? It's not an easy question to answer, because of course the answer to the question is you don't really know until you would be in that position. And it's so, what's the word? It's so morally ambiguous. It's so morally difficult. It shouldn't be. If you know for sure that this is going to grow up to be a Rasha, you have to kill him. But it somehow doesn't work. It's nicht pashat. But what I said to my son is, the Eibishter created living things in the world, right? The definition in Torah of a living thing is something that lives forever. When something violates the principle of life the way he does, it experiences what's called kadas. It dies forever. Gone, cut off, erased. So that's what I was trying to tell my son. You understand? An evil on this level, there's nothing redemptive. There's nothing, no reason for continued living. So in terms of religion, in terms of whatever it is, Gilgulim, he's gone. You don't have to sit here. But if you're in my class, you're learning with me. You're not playing around. I'm sorry, you're adults. I get it. But I don't deal with this. I'm just not. You can do whatever you want, but just don't do it here, please. I think it's reasonable. I don't know what you're busy with, but it's not with me. And it's not nice. I don't like it. Okay, I've been busy teaching for 30 years. I put up with it. I don't do it anymore. Not in Besrivka, not with the boys, and I'm not doing it here, for sure not. Make up your mind. If you don't want to sit here, you don't have to. But don't sit here and play around, please. If I'm boring, go out. If you don't like what I'm saying, don't sit here. But don't sit here and play. Okay. Miyena shel teira shel Pirish Rashi. The chassidus of this Rashi. And here's what the Rebbe is going to do. He's going to spin it. He's not going to ask why people and animals have to be killed, or what you said, the spiritual equivalent of people and animals today. He's going to flip it the other way. Why the building is not. Listen to this. Listen. Mevur b'Chasidus. Chasidus explains. The klipas Amalek b'Avodah, the klipa of Amalek spiritually, right? We learned on Maimer of the Rebbe, if you remember, where the Rebbe said two things. Number one, coldness. Number two, doubt, suffix, right? Here the Rebbe brings the first. Amalek's whole idea is asher korcha baderech. He cools you off. Shemekarer es ha'adam. He makes a person cold. Shaloi lehispol me'elakus v'chulu. He should not respond to godliness. He should have no feelings for godliness. Now, so Amalek represents an apathy. Amalek represents a coldness. Amalek represents I probably told you the story 20 times. There's an expression in Yiddish in Pashas Vayechi. You have Yaakov Avinu is giving brachas to his children. Remember that? But the first three he doesn't give brachas to. The first three he criticizes. Reuven he criticizes because of the story of Bilhah. Shimon and Levi he criticizes for the story of Shechem and the story of Yosef. So it says, Ki ba'apam horgu ish, which means ba'apam. With their anger, they killed a man, which is a reference to the whole city of Shechem. Ki ba'apam, with their anger, they killed a man, meaning a whole city of people. Something ikrush, apam horgu, I forgot the pasuk. They ikrush, they uprooted an ox that goes on Yosef Atzadik. So there's a Yiddish expression. Ki ba'apam horgu means with their anger, they killed a city of people. Af means anger. But af also means the nose. So there's a Yiddish expression. Ki ba'apam mit a krimton mit noz harget men a mensch. You understand Yiddish? You make a funny face with your nose and you kill a person. Oh, you see that guy, Moshe? Moshe. He's dead, finished. It takes so little to destroy a person. Ki ba'apam, him, finished, he's dead. You can do the same thing to Yiddishkeit. That's Amalek. Amalek doesn't have to hurt you. He has to just put in that, I told you the story with my father so many times. My father told me the story many times. He was a kid. He had just moved to Philadelphia from Russia. The shliach in Philadelphia was Popek, Baram Popek was a Chassidish Yid. So he asked my father to go around to the shuls to put out papers for the Mesilas Shabbos. So my father was so excited. He's going to help the Rebbe's shliach. It was like the biggest thing in the universe for him. And we come into this shul. It was an old Chabadnik, old Lubavitcher Chassid from the Chveisvas, from the Middle Ages. And it was Erev Shabbos, this Friday afternoon. My father runs into the shul, he's putting on the papers, and the guy says, "Younger man, Yingala, come here, come over." My father was around 15, 14, 15. Was telste, what are you giving out? So he showed him the page very proudly, Shabbos, and if you understood the time, you would understand that Jews were falling by like flies. Millions of Jews were losing their Yiddishkeit so fast. And he was making a Mesilas Shabbos that kids who were going to public school would have a little bit of Yiddishkeit. He takes the page, this old man, he's reading it, he's analyzing it, he's studying it, he studiert von alle Seiten. And when he finishes, he looks up at my father and says, "Lav dafka amadafta sel. I'm not sure you should give this out." My father said it was like someone punched him in the stomach and all of the air came out of his lungs. Like, how could you say that? He was a kid, he was so naive. He was excited about helping the Rebbe's Shliach. And here an old Lubavitcher Chassid with a big white beard says, "I'm not sure." That's Amalek. That's Amalek. I'm not sure. It's enough. You can take the entire enthusiasm of a person away with that alone. So what's the answer to that? How do you react to that? How do you deal with Kriros? So the Rebbe continues. There's only one way to remove not just the reality of Amalek, but the memory of Amalek, through serving Hashem with Kabbalah Sel. What does Kabbalah Sel mean? I'm doing this, it doesn't matter why. If I'm doing this for a reason, you can come across and say, listen, a different reason, maybe not. But if I am doing this, and there's no reason attached to what I'm doing it. You cannot cool me off. You understand? So the only way to answer the cynical, kimtan mit nuz, a funny face, the lav dafke, maybe not, putting a little doubt, the only way to answer that uncertainty and that undoubt is with this is what I'm doing. I don't have to know why. This is what I'm doing. Kabbalah Sel. No? And in life, what's Kabbalah Sel? In the world, what's Kabbalah Sel? Stones. Somebody that has no life. Turn the page, through the last page. With me.
Yeah.
Says the Rebbe, Amalek. The Veresh is going. There's Amalek and there's Veresh. Amalek is the first of the nations. Now, so you have many nations, and then you have Amalek.
Why is it first of the nation?
Amalek is called the Reishis Goyim. To pass this, Reishis Goyim Amalek. The source of all nations is Amalek.
Really?
Yeah.
What was all other nations that were?
Just 1 second. No, this is not historic. This is spiritual.
Yeah, hello.
Nations have good and bad. So all of the nations you don't have to destroy. You separate the good from the bad. The good you uplift, and the bad you destroy. Amalek is considered entirely evil. Amalek you have to destroy. It happens like this. You have other nations, Zayin Umes, and which represent Zayin Mides. The 7 emotions. Says the Rebbe, Amalek.
What is lesson? Oh, excuse me. Yeah, hi. What you learn to know today?
I'm
What
sorry.
are we learning today? Amalek.
We're learning about Amalek. We ju-
Okay. Yeah, it's Mushka. I'm not feel good, so I'm connected.
Okay, hello. But you have to put yourself on mute.
Okay.
Says the Rebbe, Amalek yecholim lifel beikir bezel yomazeh. Amalek is able to have an adverse influence on the equal and opposite of Goyim. What does that mean? You have Zayin Midas, the Nefesh Elokis, the 7 emotional attributes of the divine soul, Ubechol Nefesh Abahamis, and in all of the animal soul. Va'ad, the ability of Amalek to influence adversely the 7 emotions of the godly soul and the animal soul is She'ein Hashem Shalom. Hashem's name is not going to be whole. And we talked about this in the earlier Sikha. It's Yutke, not Vavke, which means Zayin Midas de Lamaila. That Amalek not being whole means the separation from the higher levels from the Midas of Elokus. The Eina Kisei Shalom, Hashem's throne is not whole, which is Case B'lei Aleph. It's Chav Samov, not the Aleph, which means Ein Alufe Shal Olam Nigla. The master of Hashem over his world is not revealed. V'hahelem v'hakisei da'elam, and the hiddenness and the blockage of the world. Af sha'ashamayim kisi, even though the heavens is Hashem's chair. V'ha'aretz ha'dem ragli, and the earth is Hashem's footstool. And he says the princess Shrafraf, which means a footstool. So Amalek's ability to attack is primarily on our emotional selves, on our human selves. And I'm reading on. Uba Adam, how is it in people? Hareze ish, hamakabel ish, as a man and a woman. V'nikra kein al shem amidas, do with the human emotions. Ukashem bakatnas, and when they're young, hareze elo v'yenek, they're very youthful. And when they get older, then they're adult, obviously. Uba nefesh alekith shalei, and in the divine soul, mished va'adseh, betukva, an ox, which represents strength, and sem means weakness. Ebechalisha, so weakness, which is bakatnas. Top of the second column. This is why when you talk about erasing the memory of Amalek, it means it means all living things. Now, I read this very quickly. The reason I read this very quickly because I don't want to spend another whole class on these few lines. I just want to get to the Nakuda. The Nakuda is this. Where can somebody plant doubt in your sophisticated self? You have an idea in your mind. You have a feeling in your heart. Someone comes up and says, maybe not. Yeah. What about in an action? You're going to do something. And this action is not because of how you feel or what you understand. You're just going to do it. You can't take away from a person an action with coldness. You could take away from a person a feeling with coldness. You can take away from a person a philosophy with coldness. You can't take away from a person a commitment, a bittul with coldness. If you're a soldier, right, and soldiers are raised on discipline, soldiers are raised on authority, you can't cool a soldier off. Why? He does what he's told. And you say to him, I don't understand what you're doing it. I don't either understand what I'm doing. This is what I got to do. Finished. So the Rebbe says, understand that the Zecher Amalek, the idea that there's a memory of Amalek means what? The memory of the concept of cooling people off applies to what part of a person? The part of the person that understands, the part of the person that feels. Let's read the last paragraph, please. Avo, bebechinas doimim. What about a rock? And you know what a house is made up? Many rocks. That's what homes are made up of. Many rocks. They're not alive. Rocks represent Kabbalah Sale. Shehi avoided the Kabbalah Sale. This is the service of Kabbalah Sale. And the Rebbe brings the pasuk, Imloi shivisi v'demamti. And the meaning of the word v'demamti means I go silent, which is the inyan of bittul of a Kabbalah Sale, whatever Imloi shivisi means. But this is a great opportunity to talk about this. Kabbalah Sale means accepting the yoke of heaven. Hashem tells me to do something and I do it. I don't have to understand. I don't have to feel. I don't have to agree. That's like a stone. Let's talk this through. There was a Yid whose name was Nissen Mendel, Professor Nissen Mendel. He worked with the Rebbe forever. He came to America with the Frierdiker Rebbe on the same ship in 1940. And he was hired by the Frierdiker Rebbe to work in Americas. When our Rebbe arrived, he worked with the Rebbe and he worked with the Rebbe till he died in the late 1990s, I think. Nissen Mendel, he was a smart man, very intelligent man. He was a doctor, a professor of kind of whatever. He was a very talented, spoke many languages. He wrote the Rebbe's letters. He was very, very close to the Rebbe. Nissen Mendel also read many books on behalf of Chabad. And he translated the Tanya. So when he translated the Tanya, you come across Doimim Tzemeach Chai Medaber. Doimim Tzemeach Chai Medaber. You know what that means? Doimim Tzemeach Chai Medaber? Medaber means a person who can speak or has intelligence. Chai means an animal. Tzemeach means a plant. What does Doimim mean? So he wrote inanimate. Ina means not animated, right? What does animated mean? Where do you have the word animated? In cartoons are animated, right? Movement.
Right.
Inanimate means no motion, no movement. So they crossed out the word inanimate. He says you can't say inanimate because Hashem is animating the rock every minute. What is the true translation of the word doimim? Does anybody know Hebrew?
Not alive.
No.
Like a blood.
Doimim means silent. Demama means silence. The meaning of the word doimim means silent. That's a taich. So we translate it as when I come across the word, I get very nervous. I know the Rebbe said I can't say inanimate, but the right word is inanimate. So I use words like the mineral kingdom. Minerals, rocks, minerals. But the Rebbe didn't want to use the word inanimate because inanimate doesn't only mean it's not moving. It means that nobody else is moving it and the Eibishter is making it exist. So the Rebbe told Mendel not to use the word inanimate. I don't know what alternative he gave him, but the literal translation of the word daimim is silence, right? You want to hear a nice story. You want to hear a nice story. You know how stories go. When someone tells you you want to hear a nice story, you're going to hear it whether you want to or not. So why do you say you want to hear it? It's a figure of speech. There was a big misnagid in the times of the Alter Rebbe. He was a big lam, and he was also an Edel Charid. He really felt that Chassidim were bad. He didn't know much about them, but he heard that the Vilna Gaon was against Chassidim. He had in his house one of the oldest Svarim of Chassidim ever published. It's called the Sefer Noyim El Melech. The Melech Lezhensky was a contemporary of the Alter Rebbe. He was considerably older than the Alter Rebbe. He was a Talmud of the Maggid. This Misnagid had in his house the Sefer Noyim El Melech. Where did he keep it? He had a table that the legs were crippled, where one leg was shorter than the other. So he put the Noim and the Melech under the leg of the table, and the table shouldn't limp, you understand? That's it. One day, I think the Alter Rebbe came by this Misnagid's house. And the Misnagid says, I have a sefer from one of your chevre. I use it to keep my table straight. What can you tell me about the person who wrote this sefer? So the Alter Rebbe said, if you would put him under the leg of your table, he'd be just as quiet as his book. You hear? You understand or not? If you would put him, he'd be just as quiet as his sefer. That's the Taj Daimon, silent. So the Rebbe says, Kabbalah Seil is the moment, silence, bittel. Stones don't make any noise. They have nothing to say. They just are. So the Rebbe says, Amalek can't touch them. Where can you cool off a person? Where can you spin a person away from his inspiration, from his life? Where there's energy, where there's feeling, where there's ideas. But a person whose relationship with the Eibush is silence, you can't cool off silence. It's acceptance, it's bittul. So what is the reason? You have to kill the people of Amalek. In order to erase the memory of Amalek, you have to kill the animals of Amalek. But you don't have to destroy the buildings. So Pshutei Shamika, you don't have to destroy the buildings because you can change them enough. They should not be identified with Amalek. What's the Chassidus? Amalek cannot touch the Daimim. Amalek never touched it. You understand? It's not you can change the building so much that you no longer identify Amalek. The idea of something which is Daimim, which means silent, that an avodas Hashem, bittul, like the Alter Rebbe said about the name of the Melech, you put him underneath that table, it'll be just as quiet as his book. Amalek can never touch in the first place. So there's no reason to erase it. There's no such thing as an Amalek stone. There's no such thing as Amalek with bittul. It just doesn't exist. Let's finish. Amalek has no grip over there. But Adarabah, to be sure, when one has Kabbalah Seil Ubitl, Nasis Mechia Zecher Amalek. One affects the erasure of Amalek. In other words, if one has correct bittul, even in the human being and even in the animal, in other words, even in the mind and even in the heart, where the cynicism and the coldness and the doubt and then the uncertainty of Amalek is effective, if you have enough Kabbalah Seil, Amalek can't even touch your humanity either. And as a result, Nasa Hashem Shalom Vakisa Shalom, the Eibish's name becomes whole and the Eibish's chair becomes whole. Okay, again, I don't want to talk about everything that's written here. I just want to go by this Nakuda, right? We have a Rashi Sikh. So it's a Rashi Sikh, where the Rashi is exploring the meaning of the words. It's not enough to erase Amalek, you have to erase the memory of Amalek. And he splits. He says, for Hashem to erase the memory of Amalek, Hashem get into our head and take the memory out. For me or you to erase the memory of Amalek, we have to do something, which means you have to destroy animals, human beings, and livestock. What about homes? Al pi Pshutei Shemik, you'll change it. Al pi Chassidus, Amalek never touches that. Something which has no life, Amalek never touches in the first place. And then the Rebbe finally says, if a person has enough Kabbalah Seil, Amalek cannot even touch his mind or his heart also. And that's the meaning of the chair being home and the name being whole, that even in the level of our mind and our heart, Amalek cannot touch us. Questions or comments? So this was the answer to your question. Am I correct? Yeah. How do the trees remain an uncertainty? Now, girls, it's already 12 o'clock. I prepared the next sikha to teach you. If I started, I get in the same mess as I did last week. We start and you finish the next week. We're going to save this for next week. Now's the time to ask questions and make comments. Otherwise, I wrote for myself a note at the bottom of my page. I want to finish with another conversation, if it's okay with you. So now is your chance to speak. Otherwise, I want to move on to something else.
How do you relate to the animals still, like nowadays, like what does it mean, like that we need to, I understand when we say that we need to erase Amalek, it's like the concept, but like animals also go to the same category, like when we say that we also need to raise their animals, it means the same thing with that as the concept of Amalek.
Animals mean emotions, feelings. Amalek can affect our feelings. So we have to eradicate Amalek from influencing our feelings. It's very real. It's very real. It's very real.
So when you,
Let me give you this. Think about this, okay? We're talking only about Orthodox Jews, from Jews, okay? For the purposes of this conversation, we're talking only about from Jews. I'm going to make a statement. Tell me if you agree or disagree, okay? And you have to agree because otherwise the conversation isn't going to go where I want it to go, okay? But I want you to hear me out nevertheless. I think you can make the following statement. There are some from Jews who are first Americans and then Jews. And you have some from Jews who are first from Jews and then Americans.
That's sad.
In other words, there's some from Jews whose culture is an American culture. Their way of thinking is a secular way of thinking, but they're from. And then you have some from Jews whose way of thinking is written in the Torah. And their being American has to conform to their frumkeit. Does that sound like a reasonable supposition? Does it make sense to you that there's two types? Yeah, you agree with that. Yeah, thank you for agreeing. I appreciate it. It's very helpful. It's good for my presentation, for my expose. Now, what's the difference? Practically, not necessarily much. Philosophically, it's huge. If you think like a secular person and you're from, right, you'll ask yourself the question, how can I do this mitzvah? It's racist. How could I do this mitzvah? It's sexist. How could I do this mitzvah? It's phobic against some other. Because the world gave you a philosophy. Torah is not consistent with that philosophy 100%. There's many things in the Torah that the culture likes. There's many things in the Torah that the culture doesn't like. If your culture is a secular culture, it makes it very hard for you to keep doing it. You do it anyway. You're an Orthodox Jew, right? But it becomes very difficult to teach it to your children. Because you're really teaching your children something that you don't believe, you don't agree with. You don't agree with it. Then you have another kind of a person. And let's not talk about Lubavitch, because Lubavitch is Lubavitch, yeah. You have Haredi Jews in Brooklyn who mamish, they don't live in America. Now, geographically, they live in America. Their currency, their dollar bills are English or American, but they live in a world of Yiddishkeit. They don't have this question, how can I do this mitzvah? It's racist. The Eibush just said it. Eibush just said. You understand? Mm-hmm. Now, enter Amalek. Bring Amalek in. What's Amalek? Both of these Jews live in Jewish neighborhoods. This one lives in a Jewish neighborhood in Williamsburg. This one lives in a Jewish neighborhood in Flatbush. It doesn't matter where, yeah. As long as they're around other people like themselves, it's not so bad. Yeah. But you get on a train and you go to work. You're sitting on an airplane. There's someone across the aisle. This is America. This is not Nazi Germany, right? Everyone is nice. But the person opposite you is looking at you with pity. You're eating a kosher meal. The non-kosher meal is so much better. It's fresher. Whatever the Michigan, you're wearing a shadel, really? You're dressing like this in the summertime, right? All they have to do is feel bad for you. And they're feeling bad for you for being old-fashioned makes you feel bad for yourself. It makes you, that's Amalek. So now, think about these two prototypes from Orthodox Jews. We're being very limited here. And Amalek.
No weekend.
The first, Amalek's in his living room. He's invited. Amalek's part of his, forget, he is Amalek. He in his own mind is confused. Why? Because he thinks like an American. He thinks in really what amounts to a secular way. And of course, every generation, what you're supposed to think changes. So your philosophy of Judaism has to change accordingly. But you're from. The second one, the invasion is very disturbing. Why? You live in a different world. And in your world, you have no issues with the Eibishter. Why? Because you don't have an American culture, you have a Jewish culture. And Amalek meets you on the airplane. He meets you on the train going to work. He's your boss. He's your coworker. He's your subordinate. You're his boss. And he's around. He doesn't have to say a word. You just feel weird. I'm different. That's Amalek. Now, we could start debating who's in more trouble. You could study this and study this and study this, right? Everybody, we all have to deal with Amalek. But Amalek is not a philosophy written in a book. Amalek is me and you and here and today and now. You know how the Rebbe says, he summarized it in one sentence. It says in the Chazal, Al yevash mepnei hamaligim. People make fun of you. Don't be embarrassed. How do people make fun of you? They do like this. They just look at you. That's all. It's enough. If you're a 6-year-old boy and you're in a park and you're wearing a yarmulke and nobody else is wearing a yarmulke and another kid just takes a look at your yarmulke and you think for a moment, oh, why do I have to have a yarmulke? That's Amalek. That's the ganze Geschäft. Amalek gets in like the tentacles of a fungi creep into, they get into your neshama. They get in. And they get in and they get in and they get, what do? They take away your energy from Yiddishkeit, from Tein and mitzvahs, to self-consciousness, to uncertainty, to why am I doing this? You have to kill Amalek. You have to kill the person, Amalek. You have to kill the animal, Amalek. You don't have to kill the stone. Because the person, Amalek, is the smart guy. The animal, Amalek, is the emotional guy. What's the stone, Amalek? Just do what you have to do. Amalek is very real. Amalek is not a theoretical thing. Amalek is constant until Mashiach comes, right? When Mashiach comes, there's also going to be Amalek. What's going to be Amalek after Mashiach comes? We're going to look at people who don't keep Sheva mitzvahs, exactly, and make a funny face. That's going to be the Amalek after Mashiach comes. Because it's going to be the culture. Everyone's going to do what they wants. But the world we live in, Amalek is very real. We face Amalek. We face Amalek all the time. You understand? Yeah? So the human Amalek is the Amalek that's with the brain. The animal Amalek is the Amalek with the heart. The stone Amalek, there's no such thing as a stone Amalek. Why? Because you cannot take away from a person his integrity if he does what the Eibishter says with a Tvimas. He has no questions. You understand? Yeah? You have two people. They both expose themselves to the world. One comes back unscathed. The world didn't touch him. The other one comes back. He's still from, but you can see that he lost something. Why? If your Yiddishkeit is brain and heart, Amalek can attack you. But if your Yiddishkeit is pshitas, Hashem said, I gotta listen. That's it. Amalek can't touch the stone in you, the silent one in you. Amalek cannot touch. He can't. Why? Because he needs to get in. Where does he get in? The person or the animal. The stone, he has no place. Do you understand? You understand? Yeah. Am I answering you or not answering you? Okay. Questions or comments?
Wow.
Yeah, it's very real. It's not philosophy. It's very real. It's life. It's mamish life. And you should know, if you lived in Russia or you lived in Poland, where you faced anti-Semitism, this Amalek you didn't have to worry about. Just here, in a Western civilization, especially America, Americans are nice to Jews. I'm sorry, Americans are nice to Jews. Are there American anti-Semites? Yeah, but you cannot compare America to Europe. You just can't. And I don't mean Eastern Europe. I mean France. I mean England. You cannot compare. Europeans have Americans are not anti-Semitic. Listen, I was born and raised there. Maybe I'm stupid, deaf, dumb, and blind. Americans are, but they feel bad for us. Why are we different? Why are we old-fashioned? Why can't we be modern? Why can't we enjoy what America has to offer? I feel bad for them. I think America is morally bankrupt. America is a place of the richest, most materially satisfied people in the world, and then the highest rate of unhappy people any place ever. It's weird. We have so much and no one's happy. But we're to Rachmanas on me because I keep Shabbos and kosher and mikveh and tefillin. Yeah, this is you face Amalek when a goy hates a yid. There's no Amalek. It's black and white. When the goy embraces the yid, you have to face. And Amalek is a klippe. Amalek is very tough. You're young. I'm old. I'm over there. You're young. Young people face Amalek every day. It's in the Yisayim. So the Rebbe says, when it's a brain and it's a heart, it's a person and it's an animal, you got to kill him. But if it's an action, Kabbalah Seil, Tmimus, Amalek can't touch that. It's true.
Don't we be passionate about our Yiddishkeit?
It's a combination. But Tmimus, you can't change your personality. You know that. You can't change your personality. God made you to be what you are. I'll give it to you in these words, okay? The Rebbe didn't want people going to college. You know that. Young people going to college. Why? Amalek, this is why. Amalek, that environment and those limudim, those teachings, and the dialogue that takes place in universities, the obsession with ideas, it takes your neshama away. You can send a boy or a girl to university, to college. He learns 4 years, 6, 8 years. He's the same person he was before. You send another person to the same place, and the other person, when he left, was a bigger chassid, and he comes back without his soul. Why is one person affected more, one person affected less? The answer is what kind of Yiddishkeit they practice. The more sincere, I don't know how to say it in Russian. You know what sincere means? Sincere? S-I-N-C-E-R-E.
Like honest?
Yeah.
But simple honest, not complex honest. Simple honest. The more sincere your Yiddishkeit is, the less America can touch you. The more intellectual and emotional, the more passionate Yiddishkeit is, the more Amalek can touch you. Who goes into the Goyish world, you understand? Who goes into the Goyish world and is affected adversely? And who goes into the Goyish world and the Goyish world doesn't touch? It's very hard to know before. Because the person you thought was, he wasn't so frum, the world doesn't but cloud touch him. And the person you thought was so far frum goes into the world and it takes away his neshama. And the answer is, if your Yiddishkeit if your personality is a brain heart personality, Amalek will eat you up alive. But if your personality is a Kabbalah Seil personality, do what you have to do. He just doesn't touch. One has nothing to do with the other. You can learn anything, you can know anything, it has nothing to do with Shabbos and kosher and mikveh and film and amun and hasin and Moshe Rabbeinu and Avraham Avinu and Adam Rishon and so on. Verstehst? Yeah. Okay. Questions or comments? I have 6 minutes. I want to just say something to you. And I 6 minutes is not a lot of time, but next week we're going to learn this. And I'd like to start it and finish it. I don't want to carrying over for a week. Remember what I did last week is a mistake. It's life. Sometimes it happens. There's 2 concepts in our parasha, in our discussion. We erase Amalek and Hashem erases Amalek. Correct? Now in Chumash, which comes first? In Shmois. Yeah, here Hashem erases Amalek. Here we erase Amalek. This is earlier in the Chumash. This is later in the Chumash. In Parshas B'Shalach, it says Mocha Emcha, I will erase, which is the second sefer of the Chumash. And in Parshas Kiseitza, which is in the 5th sefer of the Chumash, Mishnah Torah, it says Mocha Emcha, you should erase. Right? But that's how it's written in the Torah. In reality, which comes first?
We do that.
If Hashem erases Amalek, there's nothing left for us to do. We have to do what we can, what we must. We have to erase Amalek. And the Amalek we are not able to erase, Hashem finishes what we start. You understand? It's like it says in Tanya. There's 2 milas. I talked about this last week. You remember, there's 2 circumcisions. There's mila and priya. Mila means to remove a blockage. So one pasuk says, Umaltem es Allah lalachem. You remove the blockage. The other pasuk says, Umal Hashem alekecha. Hashem removes the blockage. So which is it? Do I remove the blockage or the Eibush remove the blockage? The Torah says, I remove what I'm able to remove, and what I'm not able to do, the Eibush does for me. And the same is true with Amalek. We have an obligation to fight with Amalek. It's tough. It's tough. It's tough. sometimes need a little chutzpah. There's an old expression. I heard it from a wonderful Jew named Tzvi Greenblatt Olav Shalom. The Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos, As ponim legehenim, uboishes ponim leganedim. You understand Hebrew? As ponim, a chutzpahnik legehenim. You understand what that means? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
As ponim means a person who's disrespectful, a bold person. As a chutzpahnik legehenim. Beishes ponim, a bashful person, a shy person goes to Gan Eden. As ponim, if you have chutzpah, look ahead of you can go into the world. It's not going to affect you. Beishes ponim, you're a little shepsel, stay in bis medrash, because the world will eat you up alive. You understand? If you have chutzpah, you can go into the world and you can change the world, and the world won't change you. But if you're a nebach, if you're a weak person, stay in Gan Eden, the world is going to eat you up alive. To fight with Amalek in chutzpah. In this sikha, the chutzpah is translated as I just do what Hashem says. I don't understand. I don't feel. In any case, so there's two steps. Getting back to our point, we erase Amalek, and then the Eibush erases Amalek. So what I want to share is this: we have 5 books of the Chumash. Chamisha Chumash had 5 Sfarim, right? The Devarim is different than the first 4. Do you know why? Sefer Devarim is different than the first 4 because Moshe Rabbeinu wrote it on his own. The first 4 Sfarim Hashem dictated, Moshe wrote. Sefer Devarim is the big machlekes, Rishonim, complicated situation. Bottom line is Sefer Devarim was written by a person. Now there's halachic differences between Sefer Devarim and the first 4 Sfarim, where they shmuchim according to some opinions. Sefer Devarim is quote a lower level than the first 4 Chumash. Sefer Devarim Moshe wrote. Hashem inspired him, but Moshe Rabbeinu wrote it. So what does it say in Sefer Devarim? Timcha, you erase. Bishalach is earlier, but Bishalach was written by the Eibishter. And the Eibishter says, Timcha, I'll erase. In other words, the lower level is we as human beings have to take on Amalek, fight and destroy Amalek. The higher level is, even though it's written earlier in the Chumash, but it happens later, is after a person does what he or she is able to do to erase Amalek, the Eibush that comes along and erases Amalek absolutely. The verstehst. And in Avodah, this means we have an obligation. You're going to be mothers one day. You're going to have children in mitzvah, Gesundheit, Freiligkeit, Reicherheit, Lichtigkeit. You're going to have children, right? You're going to teach your children how to keep Shabbos, how to keep kosher, how to make a bracha, how to wear tzitzis, how to be tzniistic, how to say kishma at night, how to take negavas, how to get up in the morning and say madi. Teach them all kinds of things. Behind all of that, you're teaching them about the Eibishter. Safe, call safe, you cannot brainwash your children. You can't. Your children are going to get a little older, and they're going to start thinking for themselves, and they're going to go through the same process you went through. They're going to have to decide, this is mine. My mother gave it to me, my father gave it to me, but it's not my mother's, it's not my father's, it's mine. When they're going to struggle to make Yiddishkeit their own, they're going to face Amalek. That's going to say, okay, don't marry a goy, don't be Machal Shabbos, but you don't have to be exactly like your parents. You're not going to be able to fix them. You give them the chinuch, you give them the preparation. They, just like you compared to your parents and me compared to my parents and my parents compared to their parents, every generation of Jews has to figure it out for themselves. And they have to struggle with Amalek. And after they do what they need to do when they struggle for Amalek, the Eibishter helps. But the Seder is first Timche and then Emche. First a Yid, we as individual people and as a generation and as a nation have to get rid of our Amalek. What's our Amalek? There's no, this is emes. Teda is emes, the Eibishter is emes, the Rebbe is emes, Mashiach is emes, Chasidus is emes. And then Mochei Emche, the Eibishter gives us from the top an injection of Amunah which makes it rich. You understand? And the miracle is we're still here. Every generation has to fight Amalek, and apparently we did it. V'hadaya, we're sitting at this table and talking about it. Okay? So next week, new Sikha? Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't give you a chance to break. Chazak. Be well.
Thank you.
Gesund, sei gesund und stark. Wie wird Mashiach now? Okay, shall we? Okay. Oh. Place wer du bist. I do not know who you are.